Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're going deep into the world of nature. Well, not literally into the woods or anything, but into its impact on us. How it affects our health, how we feel, even our brains, all that good stuff. And to guide us, we'll be drawing from Florence Williams's book, The Nature Fix.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. It really is. We'll be pulling out the most interesting bits from the book and hopefully answering the big question, what does all this nature stuff mean for us, especially now with how we live today?
I mean, think about it. We're super connected online all the time, but in a way, more disconnected from, well, the actual outdoors than ever before.
Right. Way more time inside compared to, like, our parents' generation. And the book dives into what she calls nature deficit disorder. Not a real medical thing, but it gets you thinking.
Definitely. It makes you wonder if we're missing something crucial.
Totally. Williams talks about her own experience moving from Boulder, Colorado, which is surrounded by mountains and nature, and she moved to Washington, D.C., a big city.
Quite a change.
Big time. And that's what got her started on this whole journey to figure out what we lose when we lose touch with nature.
And what she found is that nature is not just a luxury or something nice to have. It's, well, it's a need. Like, our bodies and brains actually need it, you know?
Yeah, like good food or sleep, right?
Exactly. And there's a lot of research now showing how nature affects us physically. Everything from, stress to how our brains work.
One thing that really struck me, she calls it generational amnesia. Basically because kids today are spending way less time outdoors than previous generations. They're growing up without really understanding how important nature is.
Right.
Like we're forgetting something essential about being human, What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
It's a bit concerning, right? I mean, if we're not careful, we could end up with future generations who are totally disconnected from nature, not even realizing how much it affects them.
It could have a big impact on their health, both
Right.
physically and mentally, and even their relationship with the planet.
As
The book also explores some cool traditions, like Shinrin-yoku. It's this Japanese thing where you, like, bathe in the forest. Have you ever heard of it?
I have. I've actually tried it. It's amazing. It's really about using all your senses, really
Right.
immersing yourself in the forest.
It makes me think about how much we tune out our senses in the city. There's so much noise and stuff all the time.
Right? Constant stimulation. It's like information overload for our senses.
And Williams talks about how even short bursts of nature can actually improve how our brains work. Memory, focus, even creativity.
Makes sense, right? If we're constantly bombarded with information, our brains get tired. Nature gives them a chance to rest and reset.
Totally. It's like hitting the refresh button.
Yeah. She talks about how nature gives our prefrontal cortex a break. That's the part of our brain that does, like, planning and decision making. It's always working overtime.
So that's why I feel so fried after a long day at work.
Could be. But nature lets those other parts of our brain become more active. And that leads to, more creativity, better insights, and just feeling better overall.
She even mentions experiencing this herself while hiking in Utah. Like she started out all stressed and work mode, but as she got deeper into the landscape, her mind just kind of relaxed.
Sounds amazing. I definitely feel that way when I'm hiking.
Me too. Like
Well-
nature gives you permission to just be,
Yeah.
no pressure to do anything or be anywhere.
Yeah. And in that state of just being, you often find new ideas or solutions that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. Like, your mind is finally free to wander and explore.
So the question is, how do we get more of that, especially when we live in cities?
Good question. It's definitely a challenge with more and more people moving to cities all the time.
But there are some cool examples of cities that are actually embracing nature.
Right. Like Singapore, they're creating this city in a garden, which is pretty amazing. They're basically weaving nature into the fabric of the city.
Sounds beautiful. And it's not just about looking pretty, right?
Not at all. They're using nature to tackle some of the big city problems like heat, air pollution, and even lack of space. It's pretty inspiring, actually.
Shows that we don't have to choose between nature and city living. We can have both.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be some huge city project. Even small changes in our own lives can make a difference.
That reminds me of something Williams talks about, Tim Beatley's nature pyramid. Can you explain that a little?
Sure. It's basically this idea that we need different levels of nature in our lives, like a pyramid. At the bottom, you have those daily doses of nature, like houseplants or a walk in the park.
Okay, I can do that.
And as you go up the pyramid, you have those bigger nature experiences like weekend hikes or camping trips.
So it's not all or nothing, right?
Exactly. Every bit of nature counts. And it's about finding those opportunities, even if they're small, to reconnect with the natural world. How about you? What stood out to you so far? Anything you relate to?
What really resonates with me is this whole idea of directed attention being like a limited resource. It explains why I feel so drained after a day of staring at screens and multitasking.
Right. It's like our brains are constantly on high alert, trying to process everything.
It makes sense that nature would give our brains a break, a
Right.
chance to recharge.
Totally. It's like switching from a busy city street to a quiet forest path. Your whole nervous system just relaxes.
I'm really interested to learn more about how this all works, especially the impact of nature on creativity in our brains.
Me too. Let's dive into those wilderness experiences next, the ones that seem to offer the ultimate escape from technology, but might actually enhance our creativity in surprising ways. So, to study this whole awe thing, Williams went to Utah with a cognitive psychologist.
Utah, huh? Lots of wide open spaces there.
Exactly. They wanted to see how being in those big, awe-inspiring landscapes might, change something in our brains.
Makes sense. Like you'd think standing on the edge of a canyon would do something to you,
Yeah.
right? But did they actually find anything?
They did. They used EEG machines to track brain activity. And they noticed that when people were feeling awe, the activity in their prefrontal cortex actually decreased.
Prefrontal cortex, that's the thinking part of the brain, right?
Right, the part that's always planning, making decisions, and just, chattering away in our heads.
So awe basically gives that part of our brain a break.
That's the idea. Now, the study couldn't say for sure where that energy went in the brain, but they think it might have something to do with the default network becoming more active.
Default network, is that like the part of our brain that's online when we're not actively thinking about something?
Kind of. It's the network that's linked to things like introspection, creativity, and feeling connected to, well, something bigger than ourselves.
It's like science is finally catching up to what artists and poets have been saying forever. Nature can connect us to something, deeper.
Exactly. But even with these studies, our brain imaging tech is still pretty limited. We can see which parts of the brain light up, but we don't really understand the full experience of awe.
I see. It's more than just seeing which part lights up.
Right. There's so much we still don't know about how our brains work, especially when it comes to nature.
Still, it's pretty cool that we're starting to understand some of this stuff. It shows that those feelings of awe in nature aren't just, fleeting emotions. They can actually change our brains in a positive way.
Definitely. And it makes you think about how we can use nature, not just for relaxation, but for healing too. Williams talks about this idea of using nature as therapy.
That's interesting. I know there's a lot of research on how being in nature can help with stress and things like that.
Right, but she specifically focuses on veterans who are struggling with PTSD.
Oh, wow. That's heavy stuff.
It is. She actually joined a rafting trip on the Salmon River in Idaho. All women, all veterans.
What an experience that must have been.
It sounds like it was really powerful. These women had gone through so much trauma. A lot of them were dealing with, anxiety, depression, feeling isolated. But being out in the wilderness, facing those challenges on the river, it seemed to create a space for them to heal.
It wasn't just being in nature, though, right? It was also being with other people who understood what they were going through.
Exactly. They had these daily sessions where they could talk about their experiences and support each other. So it was that combination of nature, therapy, and camaraderie that made it so powerful.
And I bet being on the river itself was a big part of it, too.
Definitely. It's like the river became a metaphor for their own lives. They had to navigate those rapids, those challenges, but they also experienced those moments of calm and beauty.
It's like nature was mirroring their own struggles and triumphs.
Yeah. And through it all, they learned to trust themselves, each other, and even the river itself.
Williams talks about how some of the women who were really closed off at the beginning started to open up and connect with the group. It's amazing how nature can do that.
It's not about forgetting what happened or escaping from the past, but about finding a way to, move forward. And nature can be a really powerful symbol of that, with its constant cycles of renewal and growth.
This whole experience shows how nature isn't just about feeling good. It can be a tool for real healing and growth.
There's actual research to back this up, too. Studies have shown that wilderness therapy can be really helpful for veterans with PTSD. It can reduce symptoms of anxiety, depression, and all that hypervigilance that comes with trauma.
That's incredible.
Of course, it's not a quick fix. It takes time and ongoing support to really make a difference. But it's a powerful reminder of how we can use nature to help people heal.
And it makes you think about how we can make these kinds of experiences more available, not just for veterans, but for anyone who's struggling. But we've been talking a lot about adults. What about kids? I mean, they're growing up in a world where they spend so much time indoors, on screens.
That's a huge concern. Williams talks about how there's been this alarming increase in anxiety, depression, and ADHD among kids. And while it's hard to say for sure if there's a direct link, a lot of experts think that the lack of outdoor play and nature time is a big part of the problem.
It's kind of sad to think about, kids missing out on all those things we used to do.
Right.
Building forts, catching bugs, just running around outside until it got dark.
Right. And it's not just about fun either. That kind of unstructured play is so important for kids' development. It helps them with physical coordination, problem solving, social skills, all sorts of things.
She mentions this idea of play hunger. Like kids are literally craving those experiences but not getting them.
And without those experiences, they might have a harder time developing those essential skills. And it could even make them more vulnerable to mental health issues down the road. It's a pretty big deal.
It is. Williams contrasts this with the ideas of Friedrich Froebel, the guy who invented kindergarten.
Yeah.
His whole philosophy was based on kids learning through play and being in nature.
That's right. He believed that nature was the ultimate classroom. It sparked kids' creativity, their curiosity, their love of learning. It's so different from how a lot of kids experience school these days.
Yeah, stuck inside, focused on tests, and always on their devices. Makes you wonder if we're doing our kids a disservice by keeping them so disconnected from nature.
It's a good question to ask ourselves. Are we actually hindering their development and well-being by keeping them indoors and plugged in all the time?
It's a bit scary to think about. But the good news is that we can change things. We can push for more nature-based learning, create more opportunities for kids to play outside, and encourage them to, just get out there and explore the natural world.
Exactly. And it's not just for the kids. We all benefit from spending more time in nature. It's good for our physical and mental health, our creativity, our sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves.
So what's the main takeaway here? What should we all remember?
Nature is not a luxury. It's a necessity. We need it to thrive. And even a little bit can go a long way.
Well said. But there's one big thing we haven't really talked about yet. Technology.
Right. It's the double-edged sword of our time. It connects us in some amazing ways, but it also keeps us disconnected from nature.
Even when we are in nature, a lot of times we're still on our phones, scrolling through social media, checking emails, not really paying attention to what's around us.
Williams talks about this study where they had people walk in a park. Some were on their phones and some weren't. The ones who were on their phones, their brains didn't show any improvement afterward. But the ones who were really present in nature, their cognitive function got a boost.
So basically, we're not getting the full benefits of nature if we're not actually paying attention.
Exactly. It's like we're only getting a fraction of the download.
So how do we deal with this?
Yeah.
How do we find that balance between technology and nature in our lives? It's a question I'm struggling with myself.
It's a question we all need to be asking. And thankfully, there are some really cool ideas and solutions out there. Let's talk about those next.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we know nature is important, but how do we actually get more of it in our lives? Especially with everything else going on,
That's the million-dollar question, right? But Williams, she actually offers some pretty practical advice. It's not about like making some drastic change or moving to a cabin in the woods. It's more about those little everyday things that can make a big difference over time.
I like the sound of that. Small steps, right?
Exactly. Like, try incorporating a bit more nature into your daily routine. Even just a quick walk in the park during lunch, adding some houseplants to your apartment.
I've been meaning to get a few more plants.
They really do brighten up a space. Or even just, taking a minute to actually look at the trees on your street. Really see them.
Yeah, it's like we get so used to our surroundings that we stop noticing them.
Exactly. We're just rushing from point A to point B, not really paying attention to, well, anything.
We're missing out on all the good stuff.
We are. And another thing, being more mindful of our tech use. Do we really need to check our phones every 5 minutes? Probably not. Maybe create some tech-free zones in your home, or even just schedule a digital detox day.
A whole day without my phone. I don't know if I could handle that.
It's tough, I know. But it's amazing how refreshing it can be.
Maybe I'll try it. Baby steps, though.
Baby steps, exactly. And then, of course, we need those bigger doses of nature, too. That's where that nature pyramid comes in again, like weekend hikes, camping trips, actually getting out into the wilderness.
It's all about balance, right? The little things and the big adventures.
Exactly. But what about the bigger picture? Like, what can we do as a society to address this nature deficit?
It's a good question. I mean, it feels like such a huge problem, you know? Where do we even begin?
Well, the good news is that cities are starting to realize how important nature is. They're incorporating it into their designs in all sorts of cool ways.
So we talked about Singapore. What are some other examples?
Lots of cities are creating pop-up parks, community gardens, revitalizing their waterfronts.
Those all sound great.
They are. And some are even integrating like green roofs and walls into their building.
Green walls.
Mm.
That sounds pretty futuristic.
It is. It's like we're finally starting to understand that nature isn't just some a nice-to-have decoration. It's essential for a healthy city, a healthy planet.
And it's not just about urban planning either. I've heard about this biophilic design thing.
Oh yeah, biophilic design is really cool. It's all about bringing elements of nature into our buildings and homes.
Mhm.
Things like natural light, natural materials, views of nature.
I love all that stuff. It makes such a difference in how a space feels.
Right. It can make you feel more relaxed, more focused, more creative.
So it's not just about being in nature, it's about bringing nature into our spaces.
Exactly. And the best part is we all have the power to make these changes. We can choose to bring more nature into our lives, into our homes, into our communities.
It's empowering to think about it that way.
It is. We're not just helpless bystanders. We can actually do something about this.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the nature fix, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation?
Nature isn't a luxury. It's not something we can just take or leave. We need it. It's fundamental to who we are.
I love that. And I would add this. Don't underestimate the power of awe. Those moments when you're just blown away by the beauty and vastness of nature, those are the moments that can really change you.
I agree. They remind us of what's truly important. They put everything else into perspective.
Well said. So for all of you listening out there, what resonated with you the most? What's one small step you can take today to bring more nature into your life?
Even just a few minutes can make a difference. Go for a walk, sit under a tree, listen to the birds, reconnect with the natural world.
And if you want to learn more, definitely check out Florence Williams' book, The Nature Fix. It's a great read. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and get your daily dose of nature.